All right, that's enough of that. We've made you wait long enough. It's 2:20 a.m., but I've got a special treat. We're joined with Exotic Propulsion, Jeremiah in the house, and we're going to go over some of my alchemy experiments.
Indeed. Good morning and good evening
Wherever
to
you
those of
are.
you who are listening from various places. And today we're talking about some of the weird metamaterials that Bernie has made in his cathodic reactors, otherwise known as Keshi coil devices.
Yeah, and this one, it's quite something else because it's demonstrating this red crystalline pink state material. And shout out Johnny for 20 a.m. in Ontario. 4:20 where you are, Jeremiah, or 3:20?
It is 3:20 where I am.
All right, so 2, 3, 4. We just need someone from the Pacific Coast, and we'll have 1, 2, 3, 4. All right. So, what we were discussing though on this is that there's the anode side is oxidized in this blue, and it's the anode that is producing the oxygen, and then the cathode side produces the hydrogen, and that I predict it's some sort of hydride or hydroxide that is this red pink crystalline state material, and that you can see the blue-green corrosion happening on the top of the Keshi coil above the water here, and that on the cathode side, it actually builds up layers and nano coating. So it's weird that what we call the plus side loses material, oxidizes, and what we call the negative actually gains and produces the hydrogen. And as the video goes back, will it?
So one of the theories that you proposed earlier during our private chat is that this is perhaps binding hydrogens onto some of the copper molecules that are disintegrating here, and you're creating a highly catalytic material. Now, as you mentioned, and one of the reasons why I was interested in this material is when it's dried out, as you explained, and if you apply a sufficient ignition temperature, this material will burn quite furiously. You also mentioned that it was
through metals.
It does what?
It seems to burn through metal, like aluminum or copper, like when it each time it ignited, that like the metal itself that it was on at the moment, like also burnt with it. It was quite intense.
Yes, almost like a thermite oxidizing reaction. And
Yes,
this is
sir.
being made by simply electrolysis, 5 volts input only from basic USB wall adapters.
Yes, sir.
It's not a huge amount of power, which is kind of nice because this experiment is easily replicatable. So inside we have 2 copper coils. One of them is connected to the positive side of the USB output, and the other one connected to the negative. And on the negative side, we have this strange material. Not only do we see it collecting around the conductor of the Keshi coil, but we also see it collecting on the bottom. So it's dropping out. And so even that material could be collected and dried.
As well as some above floating too. And that in this specific reaction, it's just the Keshi coils, so it's only copper on copper. I've also produced it copper on aluminum, aluminum on aluminum, zinc on zinc, copper on zinc. And yeah, every time it forms this pink-red material that also seems to like glitter and glimmer in the light, shimmer. And it's what Sir Isaac Newton called the pink state of transmutational metals, and it's the crystalline state, he says. And that's when he says you can transmutate one metal element to another. And that below it, the next reactive state is the red state. And it seems that this red state is actually this red metamaterial state, and that it is a bunch of hydrides, and that I've seen a couple articles of a couple types of red metamaterial, I believe like sulfide or maybe lead, but that might be.
Well, in terms of the color matching, yeah, sulfides would match that, and so would some of the lead. But when you have moistened lead oxide, also known as a material called litharge in the old times, it does appear to be a very similar color to what you've got there, but obviously this is not the same material. So what you've got is composites on various breakdown chemicals that are combining with both the salt that you have in your saltwater solution and the original metalloid structure.
Well, oh, absolutely. What I was referring to that I thought was either sulfide or lead was these papers written from some labs that stated that they created this red metamaterial hydrides with either, I think it was a lead sulfide, but I'm not sure. Something like that.
Battery technology.
Yeah. So
well, you would expect those same kinds of materials to be produced in your normal flooded cell lead acid batteries.
What I have it paused on now, the middle jar that has all this red material and some black here, or bluish black, and then pink and red here. This is copper, but then this is iron, and the iron is also turning into this pure red material here. And then this jar is copper and aluminum, and some of the aluminum is also in this red state, and it's all breaking down into the red material here, as well as the wires fully being pink and red in suspended states like that. So I wonder or postulate if in this pink-red state that the metals potentially act like when they're in a red molten state, but without the heat in it, but potentially some of the electromagnetic characteristics or changes.
Well, as an audience member, the question I'd be asking is, why are these states important? What do we intend to actually do with these retrieved materials that are made in this process? And how would we like to implement them? So I've got my own ideas on that, and I'll give them now. I think that some of these highly energized materials, if they are actually energized, they may be more dynamically orientable by their magnetic dipole moment. And if that's the case, then dynamic nuclear orientation would be far easier on these types of materials than other similar solid metalloids. And so I consider the possibility of these being something that we can electromagnetically interact with and use for anti-gravitational purposes or propulsion technology. And as far as on your side, seems like, Bernie, you're just really investigating into this and looking for what you can find when you apply low potentials to these types of systems.
Yes, and then also the next step is exactly what was just I found in a science online publication just published right before we went live. Electrochemical reaction through electrolysis, if this page will load, and that through AC waveforms, customized AC waveform, that you can get different controlled electrochemical reactions out of it, and that this has been exactly what I've kind of been going for, and the next stage of the experiments that I will be doing.
Yeah. Oh, so in your comments, could this be used for the skin of a spacecraft, essentially? And the answer is that's exactly what I'm personally hoping to do with this material that Bernie is producing. Now, Bernie never set out with the original destination of producing a metamaterial that could be used for spacecraft design in advanced propulsion or exotic propulsion systems. But I look at what he is doing and I see a possibility here that we might actually be able to utilize this material in advanced electrogravitic states in order to produce some kind of propulsive force or gravity nullification. And even though this is extremely speculative, I have to consider the possibility that maybe some of these materials might be exactly what we're looking for. I mean, they were produced electrically, they were produced under high electric field conditions. And so these are exactly the types of exotic materials I think that we've been looking for, or at least worthy of testing.
Absolutely, right? What no harm comes from testing as long as you test things safely. This coil here being wound in the bagel coil style manner of Bob Grenier and the Martin Fleischmann Memorial Project, and the outside was iron, and then the inside two were copper, and this showing both the iron and the copper turning into this pink glimmering red state material. And as it gets closer to the top here, it still hasn't quite transformed yet, but then clearly showing this glimmering, shimmering reflection of light as actual crystals grow from the metals.
Yeah, it also looks like air bubbles too, which is,
That
entirely the possibility.
these ones are not, but there's many that do have it. But yeah, it's wild. Um, I'll see if I can get like a live video of it to show you the
Yeah,
shimmering
what
of
you
it.
were showing me earlier in the pre-show live, I found pretty interesting because it did look like it was glimmering when you zoomed up the camera right onto the sample.
Like
It
this
didn't
is
look like
also
just air bubbles either. I mean, it actually looked like there was some kind of reflective, flat surface crystalline
yeah,
structure.
it's bad camera capturing of it. I'll see if I can find it. But I assure you, that's actually not bubbles, but just crystals on that one. Um, Hold on, unos momentos. It's grown a bit.
And the Mad Alchemist heads off to his lab filled with jars and strange materials, as he intends to use his camera technology for your personal inspection.
So it's really weird now what came of that jar and that reaction. It now, oops, sorry, 1 second. Has, oh, let's see, get some proper light. And there's this white monoatomic spire there.
We do see the spire on the right side.
Yeah, that grew. It's broken now, but for a while it grew from the very top, and that I'm trying to show there's like a black without breaking it, but there's like a giant black layer that has covered the entire top
Well, the
of
black layer is really obvious and easily visible. We can
but
see the deposits around the edge of the glass.
yeah, and that it's sealed completely, so you can see a couple air bubbles right below the black there. at the top. And then it's still in the pink red state. And at the very bottom, there's a couple pieces that are sparkling a little
Yeah, some
bit.
of that, as you rotated it, there was a little glimmer. Unfortunately, the angle of the camera and the angle of the light is not right. You actually
Yeah,
want the light positioned almost right next to the camera if you want to see the glimmer.
good call. Is it gonna work? Probably not.
Probably not. But you pull it away and get it in focus and get the right reflections. I mean, you might have to move the light around. I don't know if you can see your own screen, but move the light until you actually see reflections, and then you'll get it. You're going to have to play with it.
Indeed. Next time. Don't fully want to break it. As that white spire used to go all the way to the top, it was quite something for a while.
Talk about strange experiments.
Right? Like it just grows random stuff all on its own.
People are going to look at that like the average person would look at that and realistically ask themselves, what is this guy doing with his life? Like, is he really pursuing the ancient secrets? Is this what he's after? Is to try to understand the misunderstood and to try to, dig into the secrets of science and unravel them through simple, old school electroalchemy? I mean, is this what this guy is doing? Who knows?
Trying at least. So this is a triple copper solenoid, just 3 copper solenoids within themselves, and then an insulated double copper wire connecting the top and the bottom of it to the top and the bottom of another one that I had half submerged in the sealed bottle. And it produced hydrogen, was bubbling all on its own for like a solid year and producing this white snow like monoatomic material off the top and the bottom until the black nano coating turned into the pink red state, and then it stopped bubbling from there.
Now, did that coil, that what we're looking at on the bottom side, well, now the center, was that originally coated in that same reddish looking hair or fuzz?
No, it was in a black nano coating through what's the caustic, although yeah, these ones were caustic coated. Um, the it turned to that red state style.
And now it's gone. So you're saying it flaked off, and now everything that was the red state is in that bottom layer?
Yeah, but then it also like I moved it and like about 6 months ago, and then everything oxidized and turned blue all of a sudden.
So you took it out of the place that it was sitting.
Yes,
Did you move it from one room to the other, or was it still
No,
in
like just a couple of feet over.
And it completely changed the way that the reaction was taking place?
Yes, sir.
See, that's particularly interesting. Almost as if there was some tie to the local refractive index of this sample.
So
The question would be, why would there be a tie to the local environment? And why would moving it affect the test sample? And
so here it is now. You can see completely oxidized. Everything turned blue. But in it, you can see the copper itself is in that red-pink state color now, not the black coating as before.
looking through and comparing it to the grain that's surrounding the bottle, I mean, it looks almost like it's plated in gold. It does kind of look golden.
Copper.
Take a look at it.
could just right. You never know because he said it transmutates, right? Different layers. Well, I need to get a mass spectrometer.
You got to rotate that thing so that people can see inside. You're showing the side that's coated. There we go.
There we go.
I guess not quite golden. Maybe more brassy. Or bronze. Yeah, I think bronze is the right description for that color. Interesting, nevertheless.
Indeed. Just from a simple change movement, right? Never opened it or anything of the sort.
Well, apparently on your cathode side, with your copper versus copper in a saltwater solution, you end up generating some kind of, perhaps a hydroxide or a hydrogenated deterioration. Whatever the case is, you've got this fluffy, dusty material. Kind of looks like rust, but it forms around the copper, and when you
Well,
dry
here
it,
you can see turning this aluminum as well as a silver coin and the copper all into the red state, suspended in that jar.
and there are a lot of deposits on the bottom of that jar. So if that was a fresh experiment when you started, I mean, it's kind of surprising to just see how much material you have on the bottom. Like, where did it come from?
Yeah, it's mostly monoatomic aluminum from the aluminum foil here, with a little bit from the copper and the silver coin as well,
Maybe
creating
it
a
will be more
different.
obvious if the aluminum, starting fresh, we've seen a picture of it, but looking at it, it doesn't look like much fell off. And we're looking at like a massive amount of deposits that looks like volumetrically it's at least 1.5 times the total volume of the aluminum crumpled foil that's inside that container. And even accounting for the silver coin and the wires, like, where did all of that deposit come from?
Right? Yeah, right. Like it seems it's a very good point of how much is produced compared to the decay rate of the solid metal with the
You can pull
monoatomic
chlorides out of
ratio.
the salt water solution and all that and generate solids, but it just seems to me visibly like it looks as if it's excessive, and it does lead to other electrochemistry questions. I mean, electrochemistry is a fantastic school of research. It's definitely something that at this point is solidly founded, and we can do our investigation into electrochemical outputs and find all kinds of fun and seemingly physics violating ways that on the nanoscale we can produce strange chemicals or chemical compositions or spin states or a variety of other things that injecting electromotive force into a chemical equation, you open up a whole gateway of possibilities. And
Right.
since pretty much 100% of your experiments, Bernie, are electrochemical in nature, I
Well
mean, you see
said.
some weird materials.
Right. So this one here is just zinc plate on another zinc plate, and it suspends the material being made right in, like, I guess that's 2/3, but this layer where above there are none, and then below it, it's where it condenses and then collects at the bottom. It's quite fascinating just how water separates itself through charge.
Yeah, zinc breaks down really easily too. That's one of the interesting things about that material is it has no problem becoming this strange white powder. There was an experiment, I
Absolutely.
can't remember the guy's name at this point, but yeah, he took a series of 4 small pyramids. I think they were about 10 inches in size. Each of them 3-sided at the base with 1 tip at the point, so 4 total vertexes, and he set them up in a configuration roughly about a meter apart and placed a piece of zinc metal foil or metal plate in the center between all these 4 pyramidal steel structures that were built out of like coat hanger type material. Basically, your subconized steel, which is mainly iron, almost purely iron, with a few other elements. So in this configuration, the zinc broke down and turned into a strange white powder. And the funny thing is, when this experimenter tested it, and he was testing the apparatus after letting it sit for a while, he touched the zinc plate, which looked completely normal, and it deteriorated into the powder as if sudden disturbance had somehow affected its molecular structure.
Really?
Almost like it had broken down, but it was frozen in time, and it took some outside influence in order to finally finish the cause. It's a
That's
rather weird incident, but it's not
well,
hard to replicate.
that's
And I
kind
have
of
a
like
friend who tested
water,
it, by the way.
but like how when water sometimes freezes but doesn't crystallize until you touch it, and similar with what you're describing in the metals there.
Yeah, exactly. It's a really weird case scenario. And I wonder about the energy density in these materials and exactly how they're being affected by the process of simply being placed passively in the center of a geometric structure and left to sit for some extended period of time. Can realistically building small 10-inch pyramidal structures, tetragons, and placing them in a certain arrangement and a zinc sheet in the center, could that really affect anything realistically? I mean, it's a wild question. Now, I have not replicated this experiment, but I've thought about doing it many times. I actually got the materials, I got the zinc sheet, and cut it to the exact dimensions as specified by the original case study. And
So
I have not constructed the pyramids yet or set them up, but it's one of those things that I'm really curious about, and I wonder if it'll work. And according to a buddy of mine who actually did replicate this experiment, he tested it. He said that it absolutely works.
so just the geometry of it.
Right, exactly. Why though? I mean, we're talking about thin coat hanger, thick metal. If the audience thinks about how thick this material actually is, I mean, you can imagine how thick a metal coat hanger is. Not the big ones at hotels or the nice sturdy ones. We're talking like your cheap home coat hangers, nice thin metal, uh, maybe 3/16 of an inch at the maximum, but generally about maybe 1/16 or 2/16. These are thin materials. They're uh, not a lot of strength. So, like, how can you build simple structures, 8-inch pyramids out of this, 4 of them, set them up in a 1-meter tetragonal shape, since they're tetragonal pyramids, place a piece of zinc in the center, and then watch it literally deteriorate over the course of a number of days as nothing seems to be happening, but you go to touch it on the last day and it completely disintegrates into powder. I mean, what a weird experiment.
Days, that's wild. Like, is it? It must be just creating an electrical differential and establishing. Oh no, anode
Oh,
and
I wish I
cathode
knew.
within itself.
I
That's
wish I
good
knew,
question.
because this is one of those things. Like we look at cases like John Hutchinson, right? A butter knife into a piece of wood, no damage to either, and that's an amazing experiment. And there's lots of other transmutation and binding energy violations that we see with high energy impulse experiments and the use of electrostatics or ionization. Now, I'll tell you an interesting story here. It was during the time that the Republican committee campaign was taking place in my local city of Milwaukee, Wisconsin. And while they were here, it was on like day 3. We woke up. I went into our living room, and it was filled with ozone. Now, mind you, we're on the 3rd story of a building, and we have outside wall and a story above us. So there's no way that we could realistically generate the electrostatic potential to fill this room with ozone so completely. But everywhere in that entire living room and partially into the bedroom, I mean, it was filled with ozone. So something strange, interesting going on at that time. It could have been solar activity or a variety of other things. But what I find really interesting is ozone can be generated by the application of high electromotive force taking place in high volts per meter or amps per meter, which is what classic electrodynamics or quantum electrodynamics knows as photons. So high energy photons can ionize the air, and you can synthesize high energy photons by using electromagnetic waves with a much longer wavelength than those photons, but nevertheless, they have high enough volts per meter or amps per meter to produce the same kind of ionization. So something strange was happening atmospherically on that day to ionize our living room. And if this is possible, what it tells us is that if we achieve a sufficient stress energy momentum level in free space, we can effectively ionize the air and use it for magnetohydrodynamic propulsion. So it's very curious to think about the idea that we've got an effect right at our fingertips, but it only takes place after a certain energy level.
Plasma, essentially.
It is a form of plasma,
Ionizing.
just like what's going on inside of your jars.
Right?
Only this is happening in open atmosphere.
That's so weird. Like that happened. Like I'm just perplexed by your story. It took me
I
off
was
guard.
shocked when I walked out into the living room and I smelled ozone.
Right?
I was thinking to myself, how on the 3rd story of this building, surrounded by brick, with a story above me and 2 stories beneath me, could I possibly have an entirely ionized and ozonated atmosphere in my living room? How could the atmospheric conditions possibly produce a strong enough electrostatic potential and an electrodynamic force in order to force ionization? Inside the building, no windows open, by the way. No windows open, no vent to the outside. No way for the ozonation to get in. I understand if it blew in from the outside, but it's sealed up. It's a closed unit.
Did someone like portal in and portal out of your living room while you weren't there, maybe?
Not that we knew of, and if they did, they left everything, as far as I could tell, untouched. And I do have a detail-oriented mind, so if something was moved, I would definitely notice.
Fair. That's wild.
I mean, hell, I even have a special knot on my blinds.
Oops.
One that I designed myself, and I don't know if it's changed. So. I'm one of those weird individuals that checks for all the details. Not the only one, luckily. We've got great experimenters from around the world. In Canada, we've got Wayne, and he recently released a video about optical gravity control using a fiber optic cable, laser injected. to cause a steel mass to lose a percentage of its weight. Now that is a fascinating experiment, and it was done by Mike McCulloch quite some years ago. He did an APEC presentation, and we covered the entire story. He tested fiber optic cable pumped with light and reflecting back through the cable as a means of sort of pseudo warp drive, if you will. Wayne tested it on a different axis and proved that you got a lot more force if it was laid flat against the surface instead of just on the edge. So, hooray, Wayne, for doing a great job as a fellow Canadian of yours.
Go Wayne, right? Got more than one Wayne to celebrate in Canada.
Go Wayne. Big shout out to Brian Kelly as well for working on the same types of experimental ideas. Brian Kelly identified that light could be used for propulsion and anti-gravitational effects. That light itself could modify the refractive index due to its relativistic energy momentum density. You could effectively cancel light waves, and you would have no vector potential and no net magnetic field. Yet, the energy from the light waves that were canceling each other out in some volume of space would be completely contained in that volume of space. And because of the mass energy equivalence, even with no vector potentials, you still have the gravitational potential of the mass equivalence for that energy density. And that's amazing if you think that you can trap energy, or that energy, into an enclosed volume, like, say, the hull of your ship. Sorry, I know that was a bit much.
That's just my thing. No worries. I like it.
It certainly is mind-bending.
It kind of like Hutchinson stuff, and then kind of like the Philadelphia experiments, essentially. A little bit.
Yeah, very much, I would say, in terms of the relationship, the extremely high stress energy momentum in space-time for both systems, whether it be our hypothetical propulsion system that we've been talking about or the Philadelphia experiment, would have an incredibly high stress energy momentum surrounding the hulls of both these craft. Now, in the case of the Philadelphia experiment, the craft was a USS ship, so we've got this massive magnetizable ferromagnetic object, and it's surrounded by degauss coils, according to the witnesses, if you believe their testimonies. And there are 3 different axes on these degauss coils wrapping the ship. And apparently they phase them with incredibly high power from onboard battery units to supply the necessary current into the system. Now, allegedly on board, there was also a series of high power scalar transmitters in the form of Tesla coils that were mounted on the surface of the ship and producing some kind of field symmetry around the entire hull of the ship. So whether or not that part's true, we don't know. Of course, the USS Eldridge was not even, as far as official records go, the name of any kind of USS carrier. So we don't really know if that's the real name of the ship or not. But
right, if just a code name, or
if all we go off is the Hutchinson experiments, then the idea that people got bound to the walls of the ship or other crazy reports that happened from it, well, that's interesting.
Well, that's actually because I have a speaker magnet right here, so I figured that out. And then now, this is interesting. Oops. that was just silver, and the magnet got attracted to silver. Prayers for your quick recovery, Red Cap Goblin. Heal up, and good to see you, my friend. Hope you have a speedy recovery. Then here the magnet is underneath the lid, and it keeps going to the center. I think this
I remember
is
seeing video clips similar to this a while back, and the observation that this thing likes to sit between the electrodes and doesn't get attracted towards either is a particularly unusual phenomenon. Now, it could be that bubbles are rising from both electrodes and creating a repulsive surface where the density in the center is the highest, so it stays there. But it doesn't really look like we're seeing all that much activity, and I would still expect the electric attraction to be stronger than the surface tension effect from the bubbles. But perhaps my scaling factor on that is wrong, and it really is something simple. But the idea that it's staying center, now that is rather unusual.
right, and how I move it there, and then it goes
Okay,
straight
so
down.
see, like it's not just staying in the center randomly, like it's
It's
strongly in the
attracted to
center.
it, right? Yeah.
Right, and so that would effectively equal a repulsion from both electrodes, but a net force in the center, and it actually gets sucked into that same zone. See, that's
Twice,
rather amazing footage. Like for people
isn't
who are
it?
watching this and seeing what's actually going on here, if you understand your electromotive force and classic electrodynamics through a conductive fluid, and this is a rather unusual scenario. That just makes me want to simply test two basic electrodes in a conductive fluid and see if the same kind of thing happens with a ferromagnetic material like that steel cap you've got there. Because if that is the case, then I wonder if it's the 45-degree setup between the
Angles.
electrodes or whether it's actually something different. I mean, you clearly have a gradient between there, but is that gradient significant enough to cause this kind of effect? I would expect it to be attracted to one electrode or the other.
Yeah, when I observed this for the first time, I was like, I have to record this and get this on camera because
Oh, definitely.
just
This is a really interesting experiment. Something that's simple to test. So, if we consider space-time as equivalent to whatever effect is going on here in this conductive fluid, and we take time as our appropriate conductor, as our medium, then we could produce the same kind of effect, but we could do it gravitationally.
and that would be a major breakthrough.
It certainly would be. It is, after all, what we are trying to do. But it's a big goal, and it's a hard goal to reach.
But once you're there, you're everywhere.
Well, that's the idea. You start to manipulate space-time, and it's just a order of magnitude before you can manipulate space-time enough to go whenever you want.
Right? Because you can't manipulate space without the time or time without the space. So essentially, you're both.
Yeah, that whole forward arrow of time gambit, that's a difficult one because it's got really valid arguments. The forward arrow of time does seem to be a rather persistent phenomenon, and it's an extremely annoying one at that.
So in this video, you can see some of the oxygen condenses and shoots straight up. I'm not sure if it's as visible in this one or the next video. It's very peculiar. Maybe must be a later video. But here, though, you can see the giant swirls of the monoatomic colloidal silver underneath in one of the exclusion zones of the electrolyzed water.
It is shocking to see how fast that thing goes actually back between the electrodes, and now it's finally fallen, which is also some good footage. But that thing whips back with serious ferocity.
Right? When I move it. Oops. But like how it looks like a galaxy is just wild, and these clouds of stuff moving along the lines. Oh. Right, shoots back right to the middle. Then she sinks. But and then after that, yeah, then it started getting attracted to
Well, it's interesting. You can see right off the bat that it's magnetized. So you've seen how it aligned itself with the Earth's geomagnetic poles and with the magnetically induced dipole moment produced by the electric current flowing through the electrodes. So that part is kind of curious to watch it, polarized. I wonder if that has to do with its pseudo-trapped behavior.
yeah, I went back to going in the middle. Then I guess it was weird. Touched both, and then it went to the center. Trying to find the video that captures the oxygen shooting up. Maybe this one. No. Just more of it going back to the center.
I suppose fairly shortly here. Quite sorry, sir, but I'll have to get back to my.
Yeah, I was gonna keep her to an hour tonight, anyways. Keep her short. Got stuff to do during the day tomorrow. Was a pleasure catching up with you, brother. Exotic Propulsion, Jeremiah. Any last words or projects you got coming up or been working on?
Indeed, I do. So I've got to make my place look normal. But besides that, yes, I do have a couple of projects. And one of them that I'm excited about is called Bobbin Spacecraft. Now, this is one of those enigmatic John Quincy Sinclair patents, or patent applications, technically. And in it, a material called supermalloy is used. Now, supermalloy has an incredibly fast BH transition curve, which means that when you reach magnetic saturation of this material, the extra electromagnetic energy is radiated out into the external environment very quickly over a sharp transition and then reaches another stabilization point. So it's a very fast responsive material. And what we're attempting to do is create a traveling magnetic wave through multiple layers of a toroidal lamination for this material and produce with this a plasmon polariton type state in the material that will act against the force of gravity and allow the spin state of the material to accumulate angular momentum with each magnetic dipole moment of the core structure. And in precession, we are hoping that we lose gravitational mass and accelerating inertial mass will be much easier. So that's the goal for the experiment. And in order to test it, we have to physically construct this apparatus. Hence why we've got the right materials finally, and we've 3D printed the bobbins and everything else to completely construct these devices. And so the only thing left is to physically build them.
Right? Like real science is a lot of work and it ain't cheap. And the majority of the time, it's, just people like you and me funding our own curiosity and experiments and doing the work and having to source the material and all of it, right? And good on you for keeping science alive, and look forward to that experiment when you're able to get her built and hopefully pass your inspection there and are able to continue with her.
Yeah, hopefully just a few days left, and then we'll get right back on it. So that's the idea. And like I said, just gotta make it look normal so people don't get freaked out about seeing things that they don't understand. Unfortunately, we do live in a society, and especially amongst your audience, if you're one of those experimenters out there, and you wonder what people would think of your lab if they ever seen it.
Right? Like,
Just just consider just consider what the average person might think if they seen what kind of wild science we're up to. It's not
what the
necessarily
heck are
dangerous.
you
It's not
doing?
necessarily a problem, but people get scared of things they don't understand, and this has always been a problem for the human race. Like, let's face it, we're alive today because instead of the type 1 personality that sees the rustle in the grass and assumes it's nothing and then gets eaten by the tiger, right? We're the type 2 personality, the survivors that thought the rustle in the grass, even if it was just wind, was some kind of danger. And so we stray away from danger. And danger is things that we don't understand as a species. So I've got to make my stuff look like something that people can understand, which sucks because, well, let's face it, advanced science, it looks weird. I mean, it's going to look like strange artifacts and, vials and flasks and liquids that are unlabeled and who knows what.
Right?
So,
Like, I feel your situation, my friends. It's lucky to be able to do what I do where I do. I remember my last landlord and her just like looking at me and like looking at my electrolysis experiments and just shaking her head, and oh god. But yeah, wish
let's
you luck,
face it, I
good
mean,
sir.
local authorities thought that a laser pointer of mine was something that was going to go bang if they touched it wrong. And they evacuated an entire area in order to inspect it, which was just ridiculous. So that's my history. I've dealt with it, been through it. Uh, it won't be like that this time, obviously, but people get freaked
For
out
sure.
about things they don't understand, and that is how the human species is. So, like, we wonder why don't visitors come and say hi more often? And then you look at cases like that, and I think the answer is pretty clear: humans are unstable.
Right, well said. And it's like guess that's another reason why I don't dry out too much of that red powder and ignite it, because you don't need to burn down the neighborhood.
Yeah, but my science curiosity brain is just ticking away, waiting for you to process a sample of that magical,
Right.
whatever the hell it is, and test it thermodynamically, find out how much heat does it release, how catalytic is it, how much does it weigh before and after the burn.
Right? All essential questions of real science that I will have to do before this summer is done, just for you, Jeremiah, and, well, for the sake of science.
For the sake
I
of
will commit
science,
to
we
it.
want answers to these questions. You have a material that no one else seems to have, and even though all you're doing is mining copper coils and sticking them in salt water with a 5-volt USB adapter, and anybody could realistically replicate these experiments and do the same thing, you've already got it. And so, here you are, advertising yourself, broadcasting online, showing your experiments and your lab updates, and you've got the right stuff, so people want to see what it's made of. And that means you've got to do your due diligence. Take a sample of it, dry it out, properly store it, take a small piece of that, ignite it, maybe buy yourself on Amazon a $12 electronic lighter for lighting candles or whatever, so that you don't have to deal with flames or butane or anything like that. And you call it a day and just show your results.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to do it, and
And where'd you go? Bernie. Oh, Bernie. We are at an hour and 12 seconds. Where did you go? Well, it was a good show. Hopefully he comes back online. But seriously, our poor old alchemist boy, he does need to dry out these samples, isolate them, and test them for their catalytic response. And it looks like he's coming back online.
sorry, my computer done broke. Um, much love. I end it now, good sir.
Yeah, somebody said say hi to Liminal.
Yeah, absolutely, and I second that. And on that notion, thank you, Jeremiah, and we'll see you soon, my friend. Much love.
Indeed.
You crazy mother. Yeah.
It's just Bernie.